Hi guys, so let's start off by talking about JavaScript operators. We're going to be covering JavaScript operators, where we'll talk about the arithmetic operators, the remainder operators, assignment operators, unary operators, comparison operators, logical assignment operators, knowledge coalescing operators, and also the exponentiation operator. Now, once we are done covering the operators, we'll move down to control flow, where we'll talk about if and else statements, switch, while, do while, for loops, and also we'll move down to function once we're done with the conditionals. If you don't have prior experience using any of these mentioned operators or control flows, by the end of this lesson, you should be able to use these operators and these control flow statements. Let's get started. In VS Code, I have a folder opened called operators. I'm going to create a file and I'm going to call this arithmetic.js. Now that we have arithmetic.js file created, I'm going to start by creating two variables. We'll call this item 1 and this would have a value of 10. We'll also create item 2 with a value of 5. In the arithmetic operators, we have addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. Let's start off by trying out the addition operator. So now we have a variable addition that would hold the values of the addition operation. So as you can see, we have the plus sign here, which serves as the operator for performing additions. Let's go ahead and console this. Let's run the file, operators, arithmetic. As you can see, we have a total of 15. 10 plus 5 is definitely equivalent to 15. The addition operator can also be used for merging or concatenating strings. We're not doing that here, but that is very possible. So let's go ahead and talk about the next operator, which is the subtraction operator. So in here, we're going to say const subtraction equals item 1 minus item 2. Let's change this to subtraction. And now we're going to run this. Of course, 10 minus 5 gives us 15. And this is our operator right here. Let's move on to the next. Multiplication. Alright, so we have const multiplication equals item 1 times item 2. So this is the sign used for multiplication. And next we are going to change this to multiplication. 10 times 5 is definitely 50. Finally, division operator. Item 2. Alright, so let's go ahead and change this to division. We save, and as you can see, we have 2. These are the basic mathematical operators or arithmetic operators in JavaScript. We'll talk about more operators shortly. So let's move on to the next. Up next, we're going to be talking about the remainder operator. Let's go ahead and create a new file. We'll call it remainder.js. Let's move this file into the operator folder. Remainder operator. Alright, basically the remainder operator is denoted with percent sign. So you can go ahead and try this. So let's have const remainder equals 10 %2. Let's console log remainder. So we're going to run node operators remainder.js. Now you see we have 0. The remainder operator basically takes the remainder out of your operation. which means if we do 13, for example, and we run this again, it gives us 1, basically because after performing this computation, you are left with 1, right? So that is the value you get as your remainder. Up next, we'll be talking about the assignment operators. A new file. Let's call this assignment.js. Let's test this. Alright, so assignment operators. Well, in JavaScript, the assignment operator is denoted by the equal sign. So when we have const a equals 10, this is an assignment. And of course, this is what we've been doing. So this is very straightforward. So running this, as you can see, we assign 10 to a. Logging a gives us 10. And this is pretty basic. Let's move on to the next operator. We also have a way of chaining JavaScript assignment operators. So we can have b equals 5, c equals 3, and now we can print everything to give us 10, 5, and 3. Basically what we've done here is assignment operators chaining. Let's talk about working with the JavaScript exponentiation operator. So I am going to create a file. Alright, so now let's go ahead and try out the two primary ways to work with exponentials here. So the first option is to use maths, which I'm sure most of you are aware of. So we can go ahead to say let's results equals. So if we go down here and say we log the results, this of course I think we're still running the wrong file, so let's run exponentiation. This of course gives us 4. If you try 4, of course, this gives us 16. We can also use the double asterisk sign, so we have result 1 equals 2. So let's do console.log. I'll prefer that you use this operator, which in my opinion is the standard. The standard way of doing things. So yeah, go with this operator, and here you go, exponentiation operator. Next, let's talk about the logical assignment operators. Go ahead and create a new file. In the logical assignment operators, we have 3 basic types of operators that fall into this category. We have the logical OR assignment operator, the logical AND assignment operator, and the knowledge coalescing assignment operator. This is the logical OR, this is the logical AND, and we also have the knowledge coalescing operator. So these are the operators right here. Let's go ahead and explain how it works. Let's assume we have let's A, and we say A equals. So basically, what we have here is that we are saying if there is a value in A, go ahead and print A. If there is no value in A, give us value. Maybe we can change this to no value. Alright, so to make it better for you to understand, the logical OR operator would assign a value to the variable if the value within the variable is falsy. Falsy meaning there is no value, or probably you have false, So when there is no value, it's also equivalent to false, that's the Boolean equivalent. So yeah, so basically when you don't have a value, this is what you get. Very similar concept goes for the logical AND. The only difference here is that it assigns a value if the variable is truthy. So let's assume we have the value in here. What we get as our answer when we console log b would be 10. Yeah, so this is very similar. Of course, we have made a mistake here. So let's go ahead and fix this up. So as you can see, now we have no value. it would only return the value if this is falsy. So as you can see, we have undefined. So the logical OR would definitely return the no value if the item or the variable here is falsy. Falsy meaning there is either no value or you actually have a Boolean value returning as false. Now A has no value, and if we console log A without a value, definitely this is equivalent to false. Basically, the unary operator takes a single operand and performs an operation on that particular value. Let's try out a couple of them. So we have the incremental. I will first create the unary.js. Basically, you want to perform checks on some conditions while coding to see if something is valid or if something is true. The if statement would return your computation if a value or if the condition is met. And the condition here, meaning your question to the code, right? Asking if this is valid, if this is true, and if it's true, perform this particular option or perform this particular operation. So let's go ahead and try out an example. So let's assume we say, first off, if condition. So let's assume we say let A equals mav, right? So we can come down to say if A equals mav, console.log the response is correct. Let's go ahead and try this. This would fall into conditionals if. So it tells us that the response is correct. What if we try marvelous and then we decide to run this again? Now, as you can see, we don't have any output because we don't have an else operator in here. Well, basically, it means this is false. That is why you see this was not printed out on the console. Let's go ahead and change this. Marvelous. And you should always remember that this would also work for numbers. So if we have 10, and we check for 10, remember we're checking for both the value and the type. So this is correct. Alright, to make it even more realistic, let's assume we have b equals 5. Now we can say if a is equivalent to a number, tell us a is a number, else console.log. So we first check the type of A. So we can simply say let real type equals let's run this. So this tells us A is a number. So let's assume A is not a number. It tells us A is a string because now it is not a number. So we get this printed out instead of this. As you can see, change this back to 10. And this is what we have. So basically, this is a very simple conditional statement. We can make this even more complex, right? So we can have let's C equals A plus B. If C is equals to 15, the answer is correct. Else the answer is wrong. Let us save and run this file. So the answer is correct. Alright, so what if we have 10 added here? The answer is wrong. So basically this is the basics of working with conditionals, if and else specifically. We'll talk about some other type of control flow statements as we proceed. So have an extended if statements by using the else if. So we can say if C equals 20, the answer is correct. Else if, with a separate condition right now, C, let's say type of C equals number, so what we can have here, this is a number, else which is unknown. So this is another simple example, and here I'm showing you how to work with else if, and then have a separate condition, right? So now this is our condition, and if this is true, this is the response or the value we get. This is a different condition, and if this is true, this is also what we get. So basically this is how to work with the if, else if statement. Let's talk about working with ternary operator, which is a basic way of writing an if statement shorthand. So I'm first going to change this. Instead of conditionals, let's call this control flow. All right, and come on. So yeah, so let's go ahead and create a new file. Let's call this ternary.js, and maybe we can have the operator. This is a quick example of working with the ternary operator. Here we have a user's age to be 18, and we're trying to check if this person is greater than or equal to 16 before they can drink. I think it's better if we have 18 right here. So if you are greater than or equal to 18, yes, you can drink, else you cannot drink, and this is assigned to the voice, and we print the voice. Let's go ahead and try this. So we're going to have node control flow on ternary operator, and of course you can drink because you are equal to 18. What if we have 17 and we run this again? You can drink. So I think yeah, of course, because it's greater than or equal to. Okay, what if we have yeah, let's say we have 17 right here. What we should expect is you cannot drink because you are not up to the requirements in our code here. Same thing applies to this option. It is possible, let's comment this for now. It is possible to have kind of like a message variable already defined, and you work with the variable in here. So you can check out, I think this sample code was gotten from JavaScript tutorial.net. So we have the message in here. So what we're doing is basically putting in the value of the message after checking for the condition using the ternary operator. It's similar to working with this, but then you just put in the variable here and assign the value to the variable right inside here. I feel this is a more concise way to do it, but the idea is you can use this, which is the ternary operator here, to check the condition and then assign a value that is true or false, right? So you have the truth here, and here you have the falsy value. Yeah, so I believe you understand how this works. It's just a shorthand to working with if statements. If you have any question, ensure you ask in the chat. JavaScript switch statement. So what I'm going to do is to create a switch.js right here, and here we have a sample expression. So we're going to assume that we have a very simple variable. We'll call this results equals let's start with A, right? And this is just an example. So we're going to switch results because we're trying to work with the value, right? So if we have the case of A, let's assume we are going to print out distinction, right? And yeah, so what we're doing basically is you have the case, you check for separate cases, and that case is kind of checking what you have within the switch. So if the result here is A, then this would happen, and when this happens, it breaks the statement here. And if it's B, so let's say you have B, so console.log So you have your statement in here, right? So console.log, this should be maybe excellent. And then you probably have C. And if what you have is C, give us credits. Yeah, so you can add more cases, but this is what we're working with. So let's assume we have C, and we decide to test this by running node control flow and switch. So as you can see, we have credit. I think I spelled that wrongly. All right, so we have credit. Well, this is the switch statement, and yeah, it's worth understanding, because we're going to be using the switch statement in multiple cases. Very, equivalent to if statement, but this is great to work with, and of course, the overall appearance of a code looks a bit neat compared to having multiple braces. So you're able to check for all the cases this way, without having to use multiple if statements. About loops in JavaScript, we have multiple ways to create loops. Let's start by working with the while loop. So I'm going to create a folder called loop, and in here I'm going to have while.js. So yeah, let's assume we have the value of count to be 100. So and then we have current value. So we're going to use the while statement to say while the current value is not equal to, and do that, not equal to count. So we perform the operation in here, and the operation might be console.log current value, and then we say current value plus 1, right? So yeah, you can just say current value plus equals 1. So basically, this would continue to run until it gets to 100. So let's go ahead and yeah, let's go ahead and run this file. So I'm going to have node loop and while. So you see we have starting from 1 down to 99. So this is how you work with the while loop. Basically you perform operations like this, and you try to. So it's going to first check the condition and ensure that it is true before executing this, right? So we said while it is not equivalent to count, so which means while current value is not equivalent is not equal to count, go ahead and perform this operation, and while you print this, add this value. So you have to be very careful with how you use this, because let's assume we don't increment. This is basically going to be infinite. So yeah, as you can see, it keeps running until we decide to terminate, using Ctrl C or Command C. Yeah, so this is a while loop, and yeah, I believe you understand how it works. The difference between while and do while is that the do while loop is going to execute at least once before checking the condition, while the while loop would execute as the condition is first checked, and it would execute yeah, until the condition is met. So let's go ahead and try a very quick example working with do while loop. So I'm going to say let our counter, we have our counter equals 1, and then we have let estimates or estimated value should give us like 200, right? And we'll say do the following statement, right? While the condition, and the condition we're using here is to say while the counter is less than the estimated value. So in here, let's go ahead and yeah, so in here, let's go ahead and put in our statement. So we're going to say console.log counter, but we're also going to increment the counter also equals 1, right? So let's go ahead and run this. So as you can see, we are able to run this from from 2, yeah, because we increment this before printing, so it starts from 2 down to 200, right? So yeah, so I'm going to also put in the comments here. So do while loop execute. All right, so there we go. A for loop is an iterator. Of course, you use it to iterate within values. Most times in a real work environment, you would use it, within arrays, but of course you can use it, within objects as well. We'll go ahead and try out a very quick example right now. So I'm just going to create the for loop .js, and the for loop works with an iterator. First, we start with the initializer. We have the iterator, and we also have the condition. So you have, this is the statement, right? So you have for you initialize here with an example, let I equals 0, and then you have the condition to say maybe I is less than 100, and then you say I plus plus, which is the iterator, or kind of what you expect, right? What you expect to happen. It can be I plus 2, it can be I plus 3, but now we are iterating it by one step, so it's more like the step. And in here I'm going to say right, so it's going to start from 0 down to 99. So let's go ahead and test this. We're going to say node loop, and for loop. So as you can see, we have from 0 down to 99, which is basically what we have here. Let's assume we have an array, since we've talked about array in the previous class. So we have let's array item equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And one thing you can do using the for loop here is to say for, let's say let I equals 0 again, and now we say I is less than the array item, which is the array item the length. So you can use this to check for the length. And then the next thing you want to do is I plus plus. Go one step at a time. What we can do here is we can say console.log. So we can pick up that array item and then use I as the index, to print out every single item within this, within the array. So let's go ahead and run this again. So you see we have 1 to 5. If we have football, for example, pi, let's run this again. You see we have 1, 2, 3 for football and pi. So basically we're using the loop as an iterator to move through an iterable object, which is an array in this case. Let's talk about the break and continue statements. I'm going to do this in the root. So we're going to have break.js, and we're also going to have continue.js. Just to show you an example, you use both of them within a loop, right? So let's assume we have a simple for loop. First, we have an item, and let's say this item. So let's say the item has an array, for example. So it's an array. Let's call it an item array, and it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So we're going to say we create a for loop, and we say let I equals 0. We're starting our count from 0, and we have I is less than the item array length, and then we have I plus plus to move one step at a time. The next thing we're going to do right now is to say item array. Let's do console.log item array, and work with the index, right? But we're going to also check something here. We're going to say if I, right, and so we can say if I gets to 5, for example, break this. Let's use the break, right? So break. Let's see what happens when we do this. So I'm going to do the node. I'm going to run node break.js. So what happens is you see we have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So I'm looking at the index starting from 0. So if I equals 5, meaning that once you get to the length of 5, break the execution. And that is where the break item comes in. It works within loops, and we are able to use this break statement to destroy the execution of the loop, right? So for the continue statement, basically we're going to be doing this. We have the item array, and the next thing I'm going to do is to say for I, let's say let I equals 0, and we have the I less than 10. Let's assume we're not working with this. So we have I plus plus. Now I am going to say if I gets to a certain item. So let's assume 2. Let's continue. So let's go ahead and test this. Oh yeah, that was yeah. So let's take a look at what happens here with this quick example. So we said if I equals 2, then do this. So what we're trying to do basically here is by the time we run this, we're going to see that we have 0, 1, 3, 4. So we skip an item 2 because we just asked the iterator to skip this using the continue keyword. Skip this specific item, move on to the next, and continue your execution. So that's what happens here. With the continue statement, you don't terminate the loop. Instead, you point it to the next iterator. So it continues execution. That being said, let's also take a quick look at the comma operator in JavaScript. So basically, the comma operator takes two items, one on the left, one on the right, and it executes the item from left to right, and then gives you the output on your console. So let's go ahead and try it. Let's just try a quick example and see what I'm talking about here. So we have and then we have let b. Or probably we can just have like a console dot log, and then you have a, then you have probably 10 times 10, so the comma here denotes the comma operator. Basically, it's not you've seen you can see that it returns the value of the expression on the right. If we decide to have like maybe a plus plus, sorry, I think maybe we should do plus plus a here. So you see we have 11, and we have 100. If you try to perform another operation here, given this as an example, you see that we are able to do that as well. 10 times 2, 10 times 10. Yeah, so the comma operator only separates the computation we have in here, and gives you the output. Let's assume you even have more items like joy, just as a name. Yeah, you're able to also print this out, so it keeps evaluating from the right. Yeah, so I hope you understand this. There are a couple of use cases where we'll probably have to use the comma operator as well, but in the end, I think we tend to focus more in using I'm using it for probably a bunch of login operations. Speaking about my own use case, I've used this a lot when it comes to working on stuffs regarding login. So yeah, and when I mean login, taking down a bunch of operations happening on the background as your project is being executed, and probably you store them in some sort of file, or you print them to your console. So we'll get to use this. If you have a question as well, come down to the Q&A or drop your question in the chat. All right, so in the next class, we'll be talking about functions and also objects. So do have a great time, and I will see you in the next class.